Hi, Bill Henshaw here again, another one of my YouTube videos on current events. And this one is very current, the second impeachment of the Donald that's going on as we speak. And there's some serious constitutional problems here. And you'll be surprised. What I'm going to say is not what you've been reading in the media, although I'm going to mention some things about that. Um, but no, with Trump out of office, I can't see any way that he can be impeached because the impeachment under Article 2, Section 4 says that the president shall be removed from office upon impeachment and conviction of high crimes and misdemeanors. He's already gone. Now, the argument you've probably been hearing is the 22nd Amendment, and what they're trying to do is keep him from running from office again because he got impeached. And there's some serious constitutional problems with that, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, that you ought to be well aware of. But that said, where I come from, and I go back to 1857, trust me, a video for another day. But the original intent of the framers of the Constitution was such that the impeachment only applied in those circumstances. They're claiming the 22nd Amendment, since he could theoretically run again, which has happened, by the way, in 1888 and 1892 with Grover Cleveland and Harrison. That did happen, and it can happen. But that said, there are no amendments since at least the 13th, because after that, there are no states in existence that can ratify or defeat amendments. And as I said in my previous video here, I've got an 84-page brief on admission of new states that leaves no doubt about it. A dead bang. I mean, that's the crown jewel of all the unopposed issues that I advocate. By the way, learn about that in my constitutional defense document package. Send me an email, youwinincourt@gmail.com. I'll get information out to you. You're going to love it. You can learn all these issues yourself that they never taught you when you were in school either. And you can then teach your children, they can teach their children, and they can learn how to stay the hell out of the system and make it much harder for these bastards to get them and convict them of anything. So that's the whole point of the project here. So the impeachment business, and in earlier times, by the way, it was only kind of an unwritten rule that the president didn't fulfill more than 2 full terms, but nothing in the Constitution, the way I read it, says that that could not have happened. And the big deal here was the war between the states, as it so often is. That and Reconstruction has so much to do with all the crap we're suffering today, 150 years later. But I suspect that the events at Ford's Theater came about in large part because the Republicans, even though that was their first Republican president, were not thrilled with Lincoln in some respects, and they didn't want him around. And he could have run, and if he had run for a third election in 1868, he might well have gotten elected. So they took care of that, thinking in their own minds they had a friend in arms there, because Andrew Johnson, for those of you who don't know, had been appointed military governor of the state of Tennessee during the war between the states. Now, he was a Democrat, but he was on the ticket to gain votes in some swing states that they thought they might have trouble carrying otherwise. Well, boy, did they misguess on Andrew Johnson, who, as far as I'm concerned, is our greatest president, and it's not particularly close. As you read, if I had read any of the things that he did, his veto speeches, for example, of the Civil Rights Act and the Reconstruction Act, if I had got those in 9th and 10th grade, my life would have been different 50 years ago. That's the truth, and they don't want you to know it. They were creating this war power government. And for those of you who don't know, especially in civil rights, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, the first Freedmen's Bureau was put in there, and it was under the control of the federal military for a period of 1 year. Like all things military that start out that way, it ended up quickly enough that the military was given permanent control over the Freedmen's Bureau and what's now known as the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Just Us. And here we are 150 years later going through all this crap. And I don't care who you are and where you come from. You are not my political equal unless or until we amend the Constitution consistent with that document and not in contravention of it. and committing acts of treason to do it, by the way. That's what you people that are out there begging for civil rights, that's what you're doing, whether you know it or not, is that you're aiding and abetting those whose intent is to overthrow the Constitution and laws of the United States. And they're getting ever close to do it, especially with the current occupant of the White House. And one of the first things he does is appoint Janet Yellen, the former Fed chairman, as Secretary of the Treasury. It's like putting the fox in the henhouse, for Christ's sake. And it's going to get a lot worse now that these bastards apparently control all three departments of government, except for the fact that we can prove that not only they don't control them, there aren't any of the three in existence. And any correspondence that I send to the White House is going to be sent care of occupant, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. There is no president in office. If we got no states, then we have no state legislatures. If we don't have those, then we don't have electors in the states. If we don't have electors, we don't have an electoral college. If we don't have the electoral college, see you later. What we have is a democracy. 3 wolves and 2 sheep voting on what's for dinner. That's exactly what we have now. And we're supposed to have a Republican form of government of defined and limited powers, and we don't have it. All of us should want it back. All of us need to work together and cut out this crap with divide and conquer they're so cleverly been doing for 150 years. And even recent events are the same way, to make it look one way when really, it's not Black Lives Matter, it's all lives matter, but not to them, not to the Wall Street bankers, not to the trilateralists, to none of them. The New World types, they couldn't care less. And with automation taking over for a lot of jobs these days, they're saying to themselves, why do we want, stupid bastards like you and me out there, walking around, getting married, having kids? We don't need anymore. We want to get rid of people like that and do it on a selective basis. And by the way, that, for me, that figures heavily into the COVID vaccine they're trying to foist off on all of us. And you can be damn sure, by the way, the COVID vaccine they get in Harlem is going to be a hell of a lot different than what they get in Park Avenue, New York. How long am I going to find out that there is birth control in there? I don't know, but I'm convinced that there is. And oddly enough, there may be some good reasons for that if we had the government we're supposed to have. You could make some arguments on overpopulation and what I just said there. And with the decrease in jobs, now the generations coming up now, what the hell are they going to do for jobs? And if they can't find work, what's going to happen? Either a very high increase in welfare recipients, and therefore a higher increase on taxes on workers like you and me that work to pay for all this, and they're taking our property in the form of our time and labor to do it, that this de facto national socialist government does not recognize. They think they own us. We have no rights they're bound to respect. Simple as that. The other thing could happen is a massive increase in criminal activity and crime rate. Because if you can't find work and you can't qualify for benefits, what are you going to do? So there's some very positive things here that can be said about this, but not with the government we have in power now, in which we're not recognized at all. The states aren't, state citizens aren't, and no one else is either, really, when you think about it. We've all been reduced by the 14th Amendment. Yeah, we're all equal, but as I've said before, not as lawful de jure free white state citizens up here. They reduced us all down to the bottom here, to what we've gone from, as I said before, from principal and agent, where we tell them what to do, to what they're calling guardian and ward. And they might as well call it what it really is, master and slave. They think they own all of us, lock, stock, and barrel. And that's what has to change, and I believe we can still do it. That may be a bit hard-headed on my part, but I've had some successes here doing this, especially in my South Carolina case, where I beat him alone from a jail cell. Was there 7 months, and beat him alone. It wasn't even close. And they finally gave up and realized they couldn't go to trial with me because I'm going to beat them, and they're going to be liable for what they did, and they are going to be liable anyway. And my success with my Oakland case that I had, a felony case, 14 felonies, we got a plea bargain deal there, time served, a major win for the same reasons. And the kid in this case was pretty much up to speed too. He had done some of his homework, and his mom had too. So we have cases like that, and that tells you that the Constitution is still there, because if they're afraid of it, and they damn well should be, I mean, they're bound by oath, be bound by oath, this Constitution and laws enacted in pursuance thereof. When's the last time you saw that happen in one of their damn courts? I'd love to hear it. So that said, I think we still have a lot of power that the framers of the Constitution put in there, that we voted lawfully to, place the Constitution in full force and effect, and it's still there. And forget all this War Amendment crap. There's no amendments after the 13th. But getting back to impeachment, while the big issue here, and they may be arguing on a limited basis here, I don't know. But with Trump out of office and with 2-4 clearly not applying, it would seem to me to do it in this manner would deprive Trump of a lot of benefits and rights he would have going through a regular criminal trial for the same offenses. That's what the remedy should be, if there is one, and if in fact he's committed any acts of treason. And yes, I'm highly skeptical about that. That's not to say I didn't have problems with the Trump administration, no question about it. But he's so much better than the idiot that's in there now, and you can't stand it. I mean, right or wrong or good or bad. So we'll see what develops. But I'm telling you all out there, get rid of as much of your paper money as you can get hard assets. Those are what's going to go up. Paper money is likely to disappear like it did in Germany in the 1920s, as I said on an earlier video, where the inflation rate skyrocketed and paper money was so worthless you needed a wheelbarrow full of paper money to buy a loaf of bread in Germany at the time. We haven't seen inflation like that here, but Germany has, and some other countries have on a limited basis, planned basis, by the way, by the trilateralists, the Bilderbergers, the New World types, all planned. This is how these bastards work. 20, 30, 40 years in advance. Video for another day, but trust me, there's strong evidence that supports all of it. It's time to stop them. And I think we're in the only place in the history of the world that we have a shot at doing that. That's why I've been 5 decades here. I'm and 15 years all in. And it's been hard. It's going to be hard for you. It's not going to be easy. There are no quick fixes here yet. But by golly, if enough of us get out there and pull together and cut out all this divide and conquer crap and work as a team, a lot of things can happen very quickly here. It really can. And once that happens and the word gets out, now they're going to have a very hard time, keeping people from knowing the truth. Even if they don't get it in the public school system, and I got nothing when I was in school, and they were much better than they are today, by the way, but still, nothing on any of the issues that I now advocate. Not a clue. Didn't know. They don't want you to know. Because then you can do exactly what it is I'm doing, and I can help you out. And you can learn and study and teach your children, and they can teach their children, and create a lot of people that know what the hell is going on here, that aren't going to get convicted and suffer directed verdicts of guilt in the just us system. That's one of the big points of what it is I do. By the way, send me an email, youwinincourt@gmail.com. I'll send you information on my materials and some documents to get you up to speed. You're going to love it. And you can actually get things done, and you'll feel better about yourself. And I've never particularly had that problem, but I feel so good about myself these days that, I don't get daunted by anybody. I'm not intimidated. The only time that ever happened for me was when I talked to Victor Herman, who wrote a book called Coming Out of the Ice, about the decades he spent in the Soviet Gulag Archipelago. There I was intimidated. What he did, I can't dream of. And he got back to America with his Russian wife and the daughters and everything. I don't know how he did what he did in that system. And yet we're really not that far from that system. I think Joe Stalin recognized a whole lot of what goes on today. That's what he was trying to do over there. It's not that much different. They just make it look better than it is. But they never tell you. But I've done some studying on Russian history too, so I know a bit about that. And those show trials, what they had over there, is what I would call here directed verdict to guilt today. You show up in a trial, and especially one of their goddamn attorneys, and he goes through and get convicted. 98% conviction rate for the dumbass. That's not coincidental. And then you go to try to appeal it, and you find out that the appeal is the Supreme Court has said no right to an appeal in any criminal case. McCain v. Durston, 153 U.S. 684. Then you try to go for writ of error, and you find out that the Supreme Court at this moment in time thinks that there is no writ of error, and that's the common law remedy. But the claim is that that was done away with by the Judiciary Act of, I think, 1928. No more writs of error, but it couldn't have been, because just as there is today, in 1928, we had 0 members in the House, 0 members in the Senate. The legislation doesn't exist. We should be able to get there. Writ of habeas corpus, even the non-statutory federal writ guaranteed by Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2, I've had suspended in my face multiple times, and I told them exactly what I'm doing and why. And they don't care. It's not a statutory. Forget your statutory writ. Let me tell you a story about Ronald Coleman about that. Coleman B. Thompson in Virginia, where he's sitting there on death row. His attorney files a statutory writ 2 days too late. The Supreme Court gets it, looks at it, and says, well, sorry about that. 2 days too late. We can't decide any of the issues that you've presented, and none of mine were, for what that may be worth. And that's the end of that. And therefore, you're going to get executed. And he was. Statutory writ doesn't mean a damn thing. Now, the big problem with all of this is that if we're right, and you're going to be just as right as I am, I have yet to be wrong on any of the issues I advocate. There's never been challenged, nothing. We're right. If somehow we're wrong and we don't know why, how do we make any changes in the just us system? All we have is elections every 2 or 4 years. We pull a goddamn lever, and the elections are controlled by the artificial corporate entities. They get the people in there that want to run for office on both sides, so it's a win-win for them. They will absolutely not respond to our efforts to invoke our right to instruct our representatives. They will not respond to any inquiries we make about what you're doing there, and doesn't the Constitution say this, that, and the other. And by the way, what you get with my documents too is all of those documents. I have mail receipts for all of them that I've sent over the course of 5 decades, trying to find out answers to questions like this, and you can't do it. So if we're wrong and we don't know why, even if we have elections and we don't, how can we make a knowing, voluntary, and intelligent use of the right to vote? And that's going into all my pleadings overtly. It's there constructively. I'm going to make it a lot clearer that there are no elections, and there aren't, because if we can prove there are no states, then there are no elections in territories. To be sure, Congress has the power to provide for elections in territories, although not for president and not for senator. But they would then face the daunting problem of explaining how, for example, the state of California has been relegated to a federal insular territorial possession. How did that happen? And like any good counselor, when I go into a court, you never ask a question that you can't answer. I can, and you will learn how to by getting my materials. Send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com. Life-changing materials here that you can learn, teach your children, they can teach their children. You'll be so far ahead of the game, life will be a hell of a lot easier, especially if we're on the path to getting our government back. That's the hope I have. I hope to live long enough to see it. Who knows about that? I'm 72 now. I got maybe 8 or 10 good years if all goes well. So that part, I don't know if I get across the Red Sea. I don't know. But if I can set the path for that to happen, that's what I've been put here to do. And I'll be very pleased with that result. So this impeachment crap, don't buy it. By the way, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all the other bastards that are in the House and the Senate, particularly the House, none of you are qualified under Article 1, Section 2, Clause 2, that defines qualifications of members of the House of Representatives as being citizens of the United States, age 25, and an inhabitant of the state you represent. If there are no states, you're disqualified for at least that purpose. If you in effect have the same citizenship as an artificial corporate entity, they're ageless, aren't they? Do they have birthdays? That's number 2. Number 3, you're not a citizen of the United States as used in that section of the Constitution. What does that mean? 3, white, male, 21. That's the way it was, and that's the way it is, and I make no apologies for that. And I want to get back to it. Yes, I do. Because if they can change the makeup of the sovereign body politic of the nation and republic and do it the way they did with the 14th War Amendment, Without those of you who get my full packet, check out my 84-page brief on admission of new states. You'll get some written notes. You hadn't better write this down. And check out the excerpts of speeches from William Pinckney and John Holmes during the admission of Maine and Missouri, the most important issue ever to come before Congress, now a little bit more than 200 years ago. And you read these, and this is at a time when the original intent was well known, and people spoke out and knew what they were talking about, not like this crap we get in Congress today. And you read this, it leaves no doubt about it. There are no states. And that issue alone, that's Pandora's box. And they can't get around it no matter what they do. It's not even been attempted. So, that's what we're dealing with here. So impeachment, Donald, if we get impeached here, which we're not going to do because they've got to get, 67 members of the Senate to do that. And even if they get over 60, which is highly unlikely, it would seem to me, they're not going to get the 2/3 that they would need. So it's kind of a wasted exercise, you idiots and the Democrats. You ought to know better even to have attempted to do this. So we'll see how it plays out. And I'll get back to you with an update when that happens, and we'll go from there. Meanwhile, send me an email, uwinnincourt@gmail.com. I'll get you info on the materials I have available. Absolutely stunning amount of material and issues that they simply have no way to get around. So do that, like my videos, subscribe, tell your friends, get the word out. The sooner we start acting as one across the boards, Americans, Asians, and Africans, the sooner we get these bastards off our back. Thank you.